welcome to episode 2 of the Planning Period podcast. I'm your host, as always, Brad Schreffler. I want to start out by saying thank you all so much. We released the first episode last week on Friday, and I have gotten such overwhelmingly positive feedback from a lot of different people. And at the outro here, I'm going to talk about a couple of specific examples that have just blown my mind. But overall, it's been really positive feedback, and I really appreciate that. I set out to create a podcast that was just me having conversations with another teacher like I would on my planning period. And the feedback I'm getting is telling me I'm almost there. I'm getting what I want to get. So I'm very happy about that. For this week's episode, I have the guest of Miss Kristen Iannuzzi. She is a former district teacher of the year, a highly involved and dedicated educator. She's helped with tons of different events throughout our district and throughout the state of Florida to encourage other teachers and help them. We talk a little bit about that on the episode. But I wanted her on because she is one of the single most passionate and driven people I've met about students being safe, loved, and cared for on a school campus. And I think that really comes across in this episode. So please sit back and enjoy my interview with Kristen Iannuzzi. I'm joined today by the wonderfully talented and amazing Kristen Iannuzzi.
Happy birthday, Brad.
Thank you. Yeah, today is actually my birthday. Now, by the time this airs, it'll no longer be my birthday.
We'll still celebrate.
We're recording this on my birthday, so that makes me feel a little better about spending an hour sitting with you and not, actually working. So it's like my birthday present. I'm allowed an hour on my birthday.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm joined by Kristen Iannuzzi, who is one of my favorite people in the world in terms of teaching and amazingness and empowering people. So, but could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Get us a kick off here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually didn't know I was called to teach. I kind of fell into the classroom by accident, and I realized that this is where I belong. It's absolutely my calling. I started in 2007 as an English teacher. And I am currently the SAFE coordinator, and I'm also the head varsity wrestling coach. So I am the only female wrestling coach, head coach of males in the state of Florida.
Yeah, and, I've heard you speak at a couple different events a couple different times, and every time you seem to have a new story of just, amazing stuff you've done and overcome. And one of the things is some of the just difficulties and adversity you've dealt with as the only female wrestling coach. And I hesitate to say, but I don't think that's even over. That still comes up from time to time for you. But, it's just...
Yeah, 8 years later, I've been with my program, just finished my 9th season, I believe. And it's crazy to see that there's still people who really don't understand that, you can be a girl and still be a leader. So that's definitely something that you continue to fight with.
Yeah, it just amazes me because I just don't understand. I would never look at someone and be like, well, you can't do this. It just blows my mind every time you talk about it.
Yeah, so hopefully one day it's not abnormal.
It wasn't really where we were planning on starting, but hey, there it is. You said you taught English for a long time.
I did, yeah. I was an English major in college, and it was a good transition for me. So I was in the classroom for 7 or 8 years before I took on SAFE.
And this is your second year in SAFE, right?
Yeah.
And she's doing an awesome job, as anyone would know if you've ever seen her speak. In addition, you are pretty heavily involved with our district as a whole and planning and speaking, and specifically the E02 conference, which I have attended for 2 years now here. And it's been awesome and amazing, and you helped plan and put that whole thing together. So thank you for that, because it's awesome.
Well, we appreciate you coming back, and you're such a huge support of ESET, and you're such a huge motivator of it and promoting it to other people, and that's what we need, and it's a great movement for all teachers to be involved in.
Can you tell us a little bit about ESET for anybody that doesn't know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So ESET is Elevating and Celebrating Effective Teaching and Teachers. Now, originally it was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the whole idea is empowering teacher leaders. For teachers, by teachers, it's this whole idea that it's not just a moment, it's a movement. And that we take this back to the classroom. How many times do we go to conferences and we learn awesome things, but then we get back to school and it's, we kind of lose it, or we get back into that funk when we're surrounded by people who, may be a little negative. The point of ESET is making sure you remember your why and making sure that you understand that we have the greatest potential to impact lives than any other profession.
And we'll come back to it, but you spoke at the first ESET I went to. You were one of the keynote speakers giving your teacher story. And you had a line that a year ago, and it's still like, I don't want to say haunts, but it still empowers my profession. You said to the group that ask anyone in the world who the best teacher they ever had is, and they'll tell you a story. And I don't know if I've ever really expressed to you, but like my entire life motto is the point of life is to make a great story, is to live a great story and be the character of that story. And when you said that, it made so many light bulbs go off in my head of why I love this profession and why I do what I do. And it's because I'm not only making a great story for myself, and as all of us teachers know, a given day of teaching is full of more stories than most professions, I would say, that most people would look at and go, yeah, you're making that up. That didn't happen. But the idea that I'm building that story in other people, in these children, is just like, it clicked with me in such a powerful and profound way, and ultimately led to my question that I'll inevitably ask you on this podcast. So,
yeah, and I have to say, like, that's the key to remember. Like, we impact more people in one day than most people might impact in their entire lives, and it's such a crucial calling that people need to pay more attention to.
I agree. I agree completely. So with that, let's get right into my first major question. And my first question for you is, what is currently the biggest problem facing education?
I think the absolute biggest problem facing education is going to be the mass exodus of quality teachers. And when you think about it, it's insane. There's statistics like in the first 5 years of teaching, 40 to 50% of new teachers will leave. And these are good teachers. These aren't bad teachers. Now that is interesting because it kind of goes to your point of, is there a bigger problem in education that's causing this? But I think if we're going to fix education, it starts in the classroom, not in the state legislation, or it's got to start with, teachers wanting to stay in this profession.
So what is it you feel like causes the exodus?
I think there's so many different combinations of things that lead to teacher attrition. And, I just read an article that compared how teachers were feeling with a study of burnout. And the burnout focused on individuals who worked in high-kill animal shelters. So the author of this article compared teachers to those that work in high-kill animal shelters. And I was so shocked by this, realizing like this is what teachers are enduring, that they're so burned out by all the outside sources coming in. They don't have the autonomy they thought they were going to have. They don't have the impact maybe they thought they were going to have. And they end up just feeling not respected. There's another statistic out there that says only 34% of American teachers feel like they're a respected profession. And that's ridiculously low and not okay.
It's interesting that you're saying that, and as we're recording this, it is literally Teacher Appreciation Week. As you're saying that.
I thought it was next week.
And I only know that because when I picked up my Starbucks this morning, somebody saw my name badge and was like, hey, happy Teacher Appreciation Week.
That's
and I was
awesome.
like, well, that's nice of you. Thank you. That's cool. I mean, that doesn't actually fix anything, but
Did you get the
it makes
unicorn?
me feel good.
Pink
No, I
unicorn?
didn't get the unicorn. I just got like a cold brew because I forgot to bring my own coffee. It's sitting on my counter at home, which was a super fun realization when I got 5 minutes away from the house. And thankfully, it's my birthday, so I got my Starbucks for free. So yay.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, that's
your birthday
perfect.
reward. So if you're going to forget your coffee on one day, it might as well be your birthday.
And Teacher Appreciation
And
Week.
Teacher Appreciation Week. So across the board. But it's interesting because you're right in the sense of teachers don't feel appreciated. And I think some cases your administration may be appreciative and some cases they're not. And I think it just sort of depends on the school you're in. But I think as a whole, we don't appreciate educators at a national level. We don't have an appreciation for what we do. What would you say if you tell someone that's not a teacher, oh, I'm a teacher, what's one of the first things they say every time?
It's always negative.
Yeah, it's never positive.
It's never positive. It's always like, oh, I'm sorry.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Or, wow, don't make much money, huh?
Yep.
Like, it's always the thing we point to. So it's not like we look at, eventually some people will say like, oh, I respect you. I could never do what you do. But that's like kind of the same thing I feel like I would say to like a garbage man. I would never do what they do, but they have a perfectly legitimate career. Like, I don't know why, like I could never sit behind a desk. So, but we always look at teaching with such a negative. Is there a way at a teacher level, at an individual teacher level, that we could actually affect change with that problem?
I think that's the ultimate question, because we have to. And I think it's just really about empowering each other through movements like ESET, but also embracing the opportunity to be a teacher leader. And of course, that comes with a change in school climate and school culture, where it's not this hierarchical idea of, the boss, but we're working together to impact the classroom. And teachers are often the last people asked what our opinion is about what's going on. And that's got to change. Administration has to start turning to their teacher leadership and respecting that this is an awesome tool for them to move student achievement.
It's interesting. I know so much. Like, you and I talk a lot, so this is, I feel like
Absolutely.
This is going to be especially random and pulled all over the place, because every time you speak, you throw me in a new direction. It feels like, just because I'm, ADD like crazy. But it's interesting because I know you're in the middle of your master's program, and getting your educational leadership master's. And I always look at, people ask me a lot, why aren't you doing that? Why are you not getting your master's?
Right.
And I say, because if I want to go back to school to get my master's and then change careers, I'm going to actually change into a completely different career. And I think, to me, that speaks to the problem in a lot of ways, because administration is a different career, and I feel like administrators become so disconnected with the classroom. Do you agree, disagree, maybe?
It's so interesting that you say that, because the first thing I would say is, I've been very fortunate to be recognized in different ways as a teacher. And the first thing they did when I was recognized as a great teacher, or whatever you want to call it, they're like, so what's next? When are you going to become an AP? When are you going to go down the administration route? And I was hesitant. It took me 2 years past celebrating the idea of being a teacher leader for me to actually take that leap. And then the other day I was speaking to somebody, and a teacher, and she said, she found out that I was in my grad program for ed leadership, and she goes, I'm sorry, you really want to do that in this, day and age? And my hope is, I don't know what I want to do. And I kind of looked at her and said, I don't know what my calling is past the classroom, but I have to explore it. One thing obviously is money. It's everything. Everyone hates to talk about it, and everyone hates hearing teachers talk about money. But the reality is, I am single. I am not planning on being in a relationship anytime soon, just because I am married to my career, I feel like.
You really are.
I'm here all the time. So, how can I support myself? And the unfortunate reality is, I had to go back to school in order to make a substantial pay increase to do something, and money's not everything, but it's certainly important to be able to make sure you're taken care of, not only now, but in the future.
And when I think about it, and I still don't think that's what I want to do, I don't know, but when I
think it's what I want to do either.
When I think about it, I don't think about the money as much as the growth. And maybe this points back to the original problem, which is, why do we keep losing teachers left and right? And I think there's a lot of studies that have shown, like, the future of work and everything else. The average person will have 5-6 jobs instead of just one. The time where you have one job and stay there for your entire life is gone. Nobody does that anymore.
Right.
And at least very rarely. And I think for our generation, that's kind of been instilled from us from the beginning. And this idea that you're constantly moving upwards, and that upward mobility, I always look at teaching in some sense as a dead end. And I don't know if that's the right phrasing, because it's not necessarily negative, but in order to be promoted, you have to change careers.
Correct. I think that's such a poignant point, because, and it's something that we talked about in one of my grad classes, teacher leadership, is what does a teacher do beyond teaching, and what is their incentive for growing and becoming that next level? And we don't have that established yet. And that's why I think there needs to be a bigger emphasis on what a teacher leader can do, as opposed to, okay, let's take our best teachers and throw them into administration, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes, like you said, it's maybe people who weren't really good in the classroom, but might have better leadership skills outside the classroom. But there's got to be some middle ground there.
Yeah. And I don't know, what does a system look like where there's a hierarchical structure of teachers? What does that look like, where you start at a different level? I mean, on some level that's there, but mostly those raises are not necessarily performance-based. They're across-the-board raises for teachers. There's sometimes a hierarchical, at least in our district, where, if my evaluative practice, my observations are higher, then I get a little more money. But raises are typically across the board. They're not for individuals. we don't have a structure in which you can say, okay, well, you're doing great, so you're going to get a 5% bump this year, and this other teacher is only going to get a 2% bump. Those things don't exist, at least where we are, and I don't know that there's a lot of places across the board there are. Is there a system that would allow for promotion and feeling like you're moving up a ladder while still staying in the classroom?
I think there's got to be if we're going to keep good teachers. Because again, I can't stress enough that, I have a cohort of individuals who also were district teachers of the year, and most of us are out of the classroom. So it's kind of crazy to me that, we were recognized as our district's, teacher of the year, and then we're pulled from the classroom almost immediately because we need you to do other things. But what can I do in the classroom, as you said, to move forward, to move up, and maybe again, why aren't we incentivizing teacher leadership as financially, fiscally, so that they have the opportunity to maybe not leave the classroom?
Yeah. So, in summary, the biggest problem we have in education right now is losing teachers.
Yes.
And there's a myriad of reasons for why we lose teachers, but I think that's definitely one of them, is that lack of upward mobility and the need to switch careers. Before we recorded, you also talked about this sort of negative look a lot of people have on non-ed majors in the field.
Yeah, so that's a really big passion for me because I've seen some of my teacher friends post about it online. I've also seen it directly. I was at a meeting with someone who's running for Congress who was a former educator, and he wanted to know what the big problems in education were. And this lady looks at me and she goes, "The biggest problem I have is non-ed majors." She knows nothing about me. I'm actually a non-education major. I believe we just talked about, you also did the alt-ed certification. My gosh, if we're going to discriminate against the entire population of individuals because they weren't education majors. There's so many different facets to teaching. It doesn't have to come from a textbook in college, and that is ever changing anyway. Best practices are always developing, always changing. Even for ed majors that went to school 10, 15 years ago, it's completely different world than what they probably learned in the classroom. It takes a special person to be in front of kids and to impact kids and to motivate kids every day. And I don't think that has to come from a textbook. I don't believe that a degree in college is going to make or break you in the classroom. I think it's really your passion for impact and moving kids. And they also offer something, so a perfect example is some of our marine science teachers. They actually come from the field where they're working with marine animals. So they offer so many different insights that maybe an education major wouldn't have had because they do come from other professions.
I am alt cert. I was a business major, and that's working out really well for me so far. And I now teach the alternative certification program in our district. Our district has its own in-house alt cert program, which we're one of the last districts in the state, we're one of the last districts in a lot of areas to still offer their own internal alternative certification program so that we can get people to meet the state requirements. And I deal with alt cert people all the time. And it's funny to me because I can't imagine a logical, valid argument for saying that those people that I teach are somehow the problem with education. It boggles my mind. And yet there are plenty of people that do feel that way.
And it's absolutely insane. I mean, you can't discriminate against a population based on a degree. It's stereotypical, and it doesn't seem right for educators. We're trying to promote these kids to follow their dreams. So, like me, I didn't know I was called to be in the classroom. It wasn't until I found myself in front of students that I realized, my God, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, and it is interesting. I can't imagine feeling that way. So I definitely think anyone that feels that way, I am completely in disagreement. That's insane. Wow, a lot of big topics already. We're only 17 minutes in. We're flying through them. Awesome. Let's go to my second question, and then we'll come back to things that we want to talk about a little bit more. So my second question is, what is something you're doing that you think all other teachers should be doing?
That's a great question. What am I doing that I think all other teachers should be doing? I think the biggest thing that I'm doing that I hope all other teachers can start doing is remembering their why every single day. And I think this kind of plays back to our biggest problem in education, or what I believe is with teachers leaving. If you remember truly why you're here, if you can get past the state legislation and the testing and the lesson plans and the evaluation systems, and truly remember that your students are the reason you're here, and the impact that you make is so much greater than a percentage on a single test during the year. I think that is the biggest thing that I do that I hope other teachers can. And I'll give you a perfect example. A couple years ago when I was still teaching English, we were going over, the standardized test answers, and we're talking about the different solutions. And I'm saying, like 8 is B, 9 is D, 10 is C. And my student goes, 10 is C. And it just made me kind of stop. And like, I realized, oh my God, like this is why I'm here. Like I have completely lost track of the reason I'm here. This isn't about a test score. These are about breathing students who are chasing their dreams. And my job is really to be a champion of their dreams, not get them to pass one single test. Like that's so arbitrary. So I hope, my hope would be that all teachers can remember the absolute reason why they're here. And hopefully that is actually to impact students' lives and not just move them on a test. And I'm not saying accountability is not important. I'm not going down that road. All I'm saying is there's a bigger calling for us all.
Yeah, I agree. Someone asked me last night, actually. They were asking me how I would determine success of my podcast. Like, what would I determine as being successful? And I said, I don't actually have a measure necessarily. I said, but I think the moment I would call this thing successful is that somebody emails me and says that they tried something. They did something student-centered or for student growth, and maybe they stopped worrying about standards, stopped worrying, because I'm a champion of that. I'm a champion of ignoring the rules, as awful as that sounds in a lot of ways for a lot of people. But I'm a champion of ignoring the rules and doing what's best for your kids, and not just in terms of making them feel good, but in terms of making them learn in a way they're comfortable with. And maybe that doesn't necessarily hit your standards directly, but your kids are going to learn the rest of it as a result. And so I said that might be my measurement, is if somebody reaches out and says, I tried something and I feel like my kids really learned something, and that might be my measure of success. And he goes, well, then can't you quantify that? And I said, I'm not trying to quantify that. I don't want to quantify that, because as soon as I try to quantify it, that's what's going to be the measure. And I don't want that. So I feel like the same way with you is like, could we maybe find an intro test and an outro test for my students where I measure their desire to enjoy life as a result of being in my classroom? Maybe. But do I want to quantify that?
Well, and how do you measure that? Like, how do you measure success? I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to sit down with the governor on what they call like the teacher roundtable, and we could ask questions. I was able to ask the second question, and I raised my hand and I said, where in our VAM score do you measure a student coming back several years after he graduates and saying to you, because of you, I didn't commit suicide? Where is that in our VAM score? Where is that in this calculation that tells us how good of teachers we are? Because I don't see it. And when we fill out these things online saying, what we felt like we did this year, I think we miss that humanist component. Like, these are real breathing individuals that have dreams and aspirations and struggles. And where is that in what we do?
I think we've gone from like meta conversation of, teachers don't love teaching right now. And then now we're on the actual human impact. Wow. However, I think it's easy for people that are not in education to discount that portion of what we do and to say like, well, great, and you can do all that, but still teach standards and whatever. And there is no point of what we do that is more important than that part of it. Because these are people, and they are individuals, and they're humans, but they're also children, even at the high school level, and they're ready to graduate at high school, and they're 18 years old. They're not adults because they hit a birthday.
Correct.
They're still children. And so few people are trying to measure that part of what we do.
You can't measure success. I actually just wrote about this in my final paper of the semester for data-driven school improvement. How do you measure success? You measure success on one test at the end of the year. But what about all the other accomplishments that this student has? Maybe, this student has so much going on at home that we don't even realize. And maybe that they were just able to get through the day, and that's successful for them. You can't quantify success. And yet we try to every single day in education.
And we build new systems and new measurements. And it goes back to what we talked about last week with, Jay and I talked a lot about, assessment and assessing teachers. And just the classroom observations, just the actual teaching model, it's almost impossible to quantify that. And that's the part you maybe could quantify. And that completely ignores the above and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know that there's a solution to that problem. But I think you're right. If we could get teachers to remember why they're here, most people would say we're here because we want to be here. We want to help our students and we want to make a difference.
if we can remember that and make our educational and instructional decisions based on that, I think we'd all go a lot farther.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Let's move to my third question, and this is the one that's entirely about you. You came up with this one for me and have driven this conversation in my head for over a year now. Who is the best teacher you ever had?
So, last year, I'm so glad you actually tweeted this out because, I just spoke from the heart. I didn't necessarily prepare a formal speech. And I said, ask anyone in the world about a teacher who has impacted them and they'll tell you a story. And the fact that you tweeted it out kind of changed my life. So I appreciate you kind of being that person to capture that moment where I said something that I really believe in. And I told a story about being a sophomore in high school and walking into Dr. Overbay's classroom for the first time. And this was still during the pre-planning time where you went and you walked around and you got your list of, what you're supposed to bring to class. And on her list, among a folder and paper and whatever, this is before laptops, she had a good attitude. And I asked her where I could purchase that because I was a sophomore and I thought it was cute and witty. For whatever reason, she liked me. I have no idea why. But I did go to guidance and I asked to get my schedule changed because I knew the baseball coach also taught world history and that would be way easier and I could get an A and not have to work as hard. And I am so grateful and so thankful that Dr. Overbay took the time to go back to my guidance counselor and get my schedule changed back to her class. It was the only time, or one of the very few times in high school, that I earned a B and not an A. And I have to say it was so worth it and such a positive impact now on my teaching career that, I don't even know what to say. I think, at 15, 16 years old, you don't understand, it's not all about the grade. But Dr. Overbay was the most amazing instructor. She motivated all of us, but she also let us be who we were. And so, for example, you want to talk about differentiating instruction, she let me go above and beyond. She let me go completely different directions. Other kids are writing essays, I'm writing a poem. Other kids are setting up a dinner table for world leaders, and they had to come up with a seating arrangement that made sense. She let me take them on a camping trip, and I had them sharing tents. That's just who she was. She appreciated me for what I was. And I remember one of the most impactful conversations we ever had. She said, Kristen, not everyone in the world is going to understand you, but don't ever let that change you. And I remember those words so well because, of other stuff we have talked about, beyond high school. But my senior year of high school, Dr. Overbay actually got really sick and ended up in the hospital. And I just figured, she would get better and everything would be okay. And she ended up passing away. And I never got to tell her thank you. I never got to tell her how much she impacted me. I never got to say, your words, what you said, they were so true. They ring true every day. I think about it all the time. And I wish I could thank her because I'm the teacher I am today because of her compassion, because of her differentiation, because of her understanding that, maybe I was a quirky little kid with big dreams and who was totally different, but that I matter and that, my ideas matter and people are going to try to shut me down because the world's not always going to understand me. But that was one of the best teachers I've ever had, for sure.
There's so many parts of me that think you and I shouldn't get along in the way we do because I can't stand the overly positive part of things. It always comes off as so disingenuous to me. And I actually wrote about this on my blog as I listened to a bunch of other education podcasts, and I've been getting ready for this, and I said there's so many of them that are just this positivity. Everything's great. Everything's great. Everything's great. And you're genuinely one of the most genuine people, that's one of the dumbest things I've ever said. You are one of the most genuine people I've ever met and so passionate and so intense in so many ways. I often tell people when they say hey, Mr. Scheffler, can you let me into a room, unlock a door? I'm a semi-admin. I have a master key and I'm yeah, where do you need to go? And they'll be 553 and I go, nope, won't let you in there. I don't let you. And they're why? And I'm because Coach Iannuzzi scares the crap out of me. I'm not going to mess with her. We're good friends, but I still, nope, don't go in there. But there's such a intensity and passion to who you are. And I think when you told that story this time, and I've heard you tell a story, obviously, I've heard you tell it at ESET, but when you told that story this time in the context of talking about you being a coach and the only female coach and knowing other parts of your life like I do, that line, I see where that line, that not everyone's going to understand you, but don't let that change you. I see where that line has literally impacted your entire life. And that's amazing to me now looking at how those pieces fall in place and going back to the impact we can have as a teacher. And, for her, that may not have been much of anything to say that. You know, it may have been an offhanded comment, but there was a passion inside her that those offhanded comments came so naturally and they were impactful.
Well, and I think that's something so important for our education as teachers, is to remember that, my God, like, we can say one thing that can change the world, literally, and you know, change a student's life instantaneously. And I'll give you another example of that. So I started my undergraduate at West Point, the United States Military Academy. And, you know, before I got there, I had no idea how to fail. As I said, Dr. Overbay was one of my lowest grades, and that was a B. And I struggled to be successful there. Like, I went from like the big fish in a small pond to being mediocre at best. And someone I knew up there said it best, like, West Point's where high school heroes come to die. And I learned that I didn't know how to struggle. I didn't know how to fail. At one point, my grade was so low in a geography class that they called dirt that I got an F on an assignment and it actually brought up my grade. So, I mean, I struggled so badly there that I was convinced that I was stupid. I was absolutely convinced that I was not capable of learning. And in fact, another person pulled me aside, and he was an upperclassman, and he threw his math book at me, and he was basically like, you know, this is hard for me to understand, so how are you going to understand it? He basically told me that I'm not smart enough to be here. And I believe that. And when I left West Point as an undergraduate at the end of my yuck year, which is your sophomore year, and ended up at UNF in Jacksonville, I thought I was stupid. I actually didn't want to go back to college. My parents forced me to go back to school. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't think school was it. I didn't think I was smart enough. You know, I went from having over a 4.0 in high school to barely over a 2.0 at West Point, and I didn't think I belonged in higher education. And so when all I wanted to do was talk to Dr. Overbay. All I wanted to do was go back to her and be like, I need someone to pull me out of this. And I ended up being in a wonderful women's classroom, Miss McGuire, in English in college. And she was my English teacher. And at the time, I was an English major, but the only reason I was an English major is because I didn't have to take any more math courses. That was the only reason I picked it, because at West Point, like, math was not my forte. And I was just done with it. So I had gotten an A in another class on a paper. And the first semester, I got straight Bs. I dropped most of my classes. I didn't think I was smart enough to get As. So when I was in the second semester class and I got an A on a paper and I showed it to Miss McGuire, she goes, "Kristen, why are you surprised? I wouldn't expect anything less." And that's a moment that also changed my life. Because I went from this kid who didn't think that she was capable of succeeding in college because she was dumb, to realizing that I am not dumb, that I can do something profound. And I went on to get a perfect score in Miss McGuire's class. I was one of 2 students ever to achieve a perfect score in her class. And I went on to repeat that because suddenly A's weren't good enough for me. Remember, I was a B student at UNF, but I had to get perfect scores because I wanted to prove something. And I ended up graduating college with honors because of Miss McGuire, because I realized that I am not dumb. And I was so convinced that I was dumb by individuals at West Point, including, you know, instructors. So I think our impact, both positive, negative, and I've also talked about, you know, the negative impact of teachers' comments to me, and, you know, you've heard that as well. But I think it's so important to remember that our words matter. The things that we say matter. Everything that we utter out of our mouth, even if it's just an instantaneous, sarcastic joke, we could impact a kid in ways we have no idea. And that's why I make it a point, and I'm not perfect, but I try to make sure anything that comes out of my mouth is positive. Because a kid could be having a really bad day, and they could hold on to that forever.
To me, it goes back to this constant balancing act we have as teachers. And you, in so many ways, are balancing, not you specifically, but I mean all of us, are balancing this constant thing of these individuals, these children that are affected by what everyone around them says and does in a way that is way more powerful than an adult deals with. And I think it's so easy for adults outside of a classroom, non-education people, to not understand the power and value of what we say. And in a lot of ways, I think it's easy for teachers to forget because we deal with that apathy problem all the time. And it's easy to focus on those kids that are apathetic to our content and don't have the value of, we can sometimes miss the value of the ones that are actually being affected.
Absolutely.
And to me, your story just always comes across as someone who gets it in such a profound way that I don't think everyone does.
And I hope that maybe my story can help other educators see the impact. I mean, can you think of a teacher who said something to you that you remember that's negative?
I'm sure I can, although not off the top of my head. It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's a little earlier for that, but
But yeah, I mean, for sure, there are teachers who definitely said negative things to me.
Yeah, and I have kids that still carry those comments, and you can tell that they're from educators when we talk about them in class. But I think our primary job beyond, teaching to the test or teaching the standards is moving kids in a way that they can impact the world. That this is so much bigger than our classroom, than our content area, than a textbook. This is so much bigger than a test score. This is about moving students in a way that they go and positively influence the world. And that's my goal every single day. And I may not achieve it, but that's my hope when I step in front of my class every day.
What do you do when you feel like you aren't accomplishing that? When you're sitting in your classroom and the apathy is hitting you, where everyone is looking like they just don't care and you're feeling stuck, what is your response to that?
My go-to is finding passion through them. And that may come in any variety of different ways. Like we have my thankful wall back there where every Thursday they just write something on a Post-it and they post it on the wall. Like it's all about feeding that good wolf. There's that Cherokee legend where the grandfather tells his grandson that there's 2 wolves fighting inside of us. One is that good wolf, and it's all the positive characteristics, and the other one is a bad wolf, and it's all the negative characteristics. And his grandson asks, well, which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed. So for me, when I'm getting in that funk, and it happens, like I'm not perfect, and I, like with grad school and wrestling season and all this stuff, sometimes I feel like I'm the most ineffective person in the world. I have to step back and realize, like, what have we done? What have we done this year to grow, to move, to whatever? But sometimes it's just about pausing and having those honest conversations with your classes. Okay, where are we? Where do we need to go? And then sometimes it's about doing a lesson is like your bread and butter, like doing a lesson that is going to reach kids. And sometimes I need to step back and do that to remind myself of the why. Okay, when you see that light bulb go on and you're like, all right, this is why we're here.
It's that light bulb moment. It's finding a way to get a kid to that light bulb. That is my crack. And I know we can kind of talk about this now too a little bit. Both of us having transitioned out of the classroom more or less. Now you still have your safe class, your peer counseling class 1 period a day, but still often you're pulled away from them for
right.
various reasons. And as I'm pulled away from my tech ed students, student tech support kids, do you miss it? Do you miss the 6 period a day, 7 period a day schedule, and do you regret your transition, I guess?
That's a great question, because speaking of that light bulb moment, several years ago I was at wrestling practice and one of my wrestlers was carrying me around on a giant dummy, and there was like 5 of his teammates, and he looks up at me and he says, hey coach, why do you teach? Like what's the best part of teaching for you? And I said, it's that light bulb moment. And he's like, you mean when we get it? And I'm like, yeah, like when that light bulb comes on and it clicks with you, and that's why I teach. Like you said, that's a crack. And he goes, well, I'm going to pretend to have those more often. And I just started laughing, and like literally laughing out loud. I'm like, buddy, I don't think that's the point of it. And he goes, well, it's already that I know so much already, but I just really want you to be happy. And that's that moment. And the kid just wants to please you. And to get back to like the regular question, to transition out of the classroom, because that's why I was here. That's like that education, like that connection with the students. And I was offered multiple positions. As I said, like there was a lot of pressure, I think, on our administration to pull me from the classroom when I was district teacher of the year, to be on that leadership team. And I think that's a stress that's put on most of us. So I was offered multiple positions, and it finally came to a position that I was offered where I still have 1 class and I could still impact 26 kids. Maybe it wasn't the 150 I was impacting, but my point to them is, and I told them this, I said, this is why I teach. You are why I teach, or why I'm in education, I should say. So maybe I can't impact 150, but I can impact 26 in a way that they can go and impact 10. And if they can impact 10, that's 260 students. So I'm already impacting more. And I think for me, that was a great transition. Now, as I go through my ed leadership, I don't know where that's going to take me. I don't know that I want to be an AP. I don't know. All I know is like, whatever God's plan is, for all that matters, all I know is that I need to be where, I can still make an impact. whatever that looks like. And I think you mentioned back with like the whole ed leadership thing is, unfortunately, in order to make a bigger impact on education, it's kind of out of the classroom.
Yeah, and I'm always in the same boat where I feel like I went into this digital coach role and as, okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to directly impact 150 kids, but by impacting 150 teachers, I impact over 1,000 kids. You know, in this case at our school, hopefully I impact 4,200 kids, which is our rough population size. And I have to hold on to that part. It's hard. So anybody thinking about transitioning out of the classroom, it is not easy by any stretch. It is nice to be able to pee when you want.
And that's what I remember saying to you last week. I think that's a benefit. Like, you get to go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom. And
that is, like, anyone that's not education will think that's a dumb comment. They're like, what are you talking about? You pee when you want. Like, no, when you're a classroom teacher, there's a 50-minute block every hour where you're not allowed to pee. You have to just hold it.
Yes.
And that is a real problem.
And that's a real problem. I mean, that's a real incentive to keep growing.
But for all of that, there's definitely a part, if you're a passionate educator, that is a struggle. And I think going back to the whole thing, like, that is going back to the beginning point of us losing teachers left and right. I think the inherent flaw in the system is the structure of the system. Yeah. It is not designed anymore, at least in our day and age, for phenomenal educators to stay in the classroom.
Yeah, I would agree. Because what do you do with your best educators?
You either promote them, you put them at the district office, you put them in a leadership position, they go in to get their ed leadership degree and go into AP or principal. But can a principal ever have the impact that a classroom teacher can?
Yeah, the data has shown, if we're going to go back to the idea of student achievement, that no, the principal doesn't impact student achievement the same way a teacher would impact student achievement. However, the principal can make it so his teachers can have that impact. And I think that's the important role of a principal, to empower his teachers to take a breath and to realize it's going to be okay. And I think like you said, like, okay, so I can't impact those 150 students, but I'll impact my 150 teachers. And I think a principal's role in that is so dynamic that, man, like, if he can get his teachers to believe in themselves and then believe in their students, I mean, that's the impact right there. So I think there's potential in that impact. But the direct impact with students, that comes from empowering your teachers to have that impact.
I don't know. And it's funny, like, I agree with you so much. And yet I don't feel like I'm going the admin route. And I know you're still, even as you're in your master's program, you're still torn by it. But
I say, when at the beginning of each semester, our teachers meet with us and they want to know why we're here. And I basically am very honest with them. I don't know what I want with this degree. For me, it's really about wanting opportunities. And unfortunately, like you said, outside the classroom, or even beyond just being in the classroom, there's not very many opportunities for teachers. So I guess at the end of the day, it's my potential to open a door for a potential position. I think that's my leadership mentor keeps telling me, like, it's not about using it right away. It's about using it when an opportunity arises that you see fits you.
Yeah. I want to end on a positive note. I feel like a lot of this got, like, not negative, but real heavy.
Well, like you said, I think it's important that we do address the issues in education, that we can't just all pretend that everything's good, because it's not. But I also think it's important to celebrate what's right. I think so often we get bogged down in the negative that we forget to kind of look at the light. You walk into the teacher's lounge or, wherever else teachers gather, and the overall vibe, I feel like, is mostly negative. People are complaining. So I think it's important to look at both sides and kind of, again, remember your why, pulling yourself out of that funk and surrounding yourself with positive people.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that maybe if I don't convince a teacher to go out and throw away their standards and throw away the district initiatives and just take a risk and do what's good for their kids, maybe I'll convince one of them to just listen and get a laugh out of the podcast. Maybe that's my secondary goal, is give some kind of smile or enjoyment to somebody, or maybe just make them feel like, okay, cool, I'm not alone out there. Let's bring it all together. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We had a lot of different points. Can you maybe just summarize and maybe leave us with one final point for us?
Teaching's hard. this profession's hard but worth it. If you stick it out, I think there's an invaluable and measurable impact that you're going to have. And it's not just on students. And I think that if you can stay through this, I've always felt like if you help others, it helps you. Like, it brings you joy in helping others. And I made it through my 5-7 years because, look, in year 5, I was looking for other jobs. I applied to other jobs. But I was very fortunate and blessed to have a mentor. Denny Bodemiller, when I walked in, my first day teaching was in November, and he kind of took me under his wing. And this is his last year; he's about ready to retire, but he's been teaching since 1972. When he came to our school from where he taught in Michigan, after 10 years, he moved down to Florida. And when he got here, this is before obviously there was even phones in the classroom. They didn't have technology. They actually wrote out grades by hand. They wrote out report cards by hand. His duty spot was the senior smoking area. Like, he would literally go out and have to watch the seniors smoke and check to make sure they had valid license that enabled them to do that. People could smoke in the teacher's lounge. One of their fundraisers was donkey basketball. Like, they literally brought donkeys into the gym and they'd ride on top of donkeys and play basketball. Like, things that we don't even think about now. This is such a valuable resource for us. And this is last year. He's been at our school since 1982. And he has made such a tremendous impact, not only on students, but I think on the staff, and has done so without any inkling of leaving the classroom or any desire to do that. So I just think that the power is within us to empower each other. Like, we have to be the ones to bring us up. And, one of the biggest compliments I ever got was from one of the assistant principal who hired me, who actually had Mr. Bodemiller as a teacher. And he said, Kristen, like, I just want you to know that you ignited a light in Denny that helped him, that I see his spark again for teaching. And if that's true, I don't know. But it just meant so much to me to know that this man who impacted my life so much, that maybe I was able to kind of help him get through and, help him with the technology as we switched over to digital, and just be able to give back to him too.
So maybe the advice becomes, if you're feeling challenged, if you feel like you're struggling, if you feel like every day is a stress, find the lifeline. There has to be someone on your campus who is here and is doing the job every day and is doing it for the right reasons, or is doing it for the reasons you are, is similar to you, but maybe just can give that positive spin.
Yeah, definitely find balance too. I mean, obviously find somebody here to guide you, and that's something he taught me, is one, say no. For the last, since 10 years now, he's taught me to say no, like, stop saying yes to everything, and just really found that balance outside of school too. And he's obviously going to be someone I'm going to be friends with forever, but finding that life outside of work, I think is an important attribute as well.
Perfect. I like that as an ending. Well, Kristen, thank you for sitting with me. I know we had some scheduling challenges to get here, but we finally got here. So thank you very much. I will give you the shout out here. Also, you can find Kristen on at the Twitters at Kristen Iannuzzi, right?
Yes.
It's Kristen Iannuzzi, Iannuzzi. I'm apparently like one of the only people who can spell it.
That's
I will
true.
Also, of course, link to that in the show notes, and that'll be on the post that goes with this and everything too. So you'll be able to find her on the Twitters. Follow her. She's amazing. She's awesome. She's one of my favorite people in education, hands down. So thank you very much for sitting with me.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, absolutely. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I genuinely enjoyed recording it. I did tell you at the outro I was going to give you some special shout-outs to some people. Of course, to Kevin MacLeod for our awesome music, which is the song Vicious. The biggest compliment of this episode, though, easily goes out to Gretchen Bridgers from Always a Lesson. First of all, if you're not listening to her podcast, Always a Lesson, it is awesome. She gives a lot of great, positive, uplifting messages for people, and it's really cool. But I had reached out to her as a listener and said, hey, I'm posted this podcast episode. Would you mind listening to it and giving me some feedback? And in Twitter DMs, she gave me a dissertation of detailed feedback, both good and bad, of things that I could be doing better. And I just
just cannot express how impressed I am with that, just as a person, that she would take the time to do that for me as someone she doesn't know. Genuinely appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And finally, as always, if you are liking what you're listening to, please subscribe on iTunes and write us a review. That's the best way you can help us out. Share it out to your friends on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Message me. I'm at Brad Schreffler on the Twitter, and I'm also, of course, at bradschreffler.com. You can find me on my website with all my contact information there, but please leave feedback. And lastly, if you are a teacher, if you are a principal, if you are an administrator, if you're a district coach, whatever your role may be within education, and you'd like to be a guest on the Planning Period podcast, please send me a message on Twitter, DM. My DMs are open, so let me know. You can reach out to me, and I'd love to have you as a guest. I want this show to have lots of different guests and different people, so please reach out to me and let me know. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next week.